In 2017, some police officers on duty at a local suburb in South Africa had a resident walk into their desk at the station, shouting and telling them something that just didn't make sense at first. But that was until this person presented his proof to them. The story that followed next was so bizarre that it continues to haunt the rural community till this day. So, you might have to stick around to the entire video to get the full picture. However, if you love true life horror stories, consider subscribing to the channel, like and turn on post notifications. And with that said, let's get straight into it. It was the early morning of the 25th of July 2017. A 25-year-old young woman by the name of Zanele Hlatshwayo had woken up early from her bed in her house in Hlatshwayo, a suburb of Escort in the kwazulu-natal province of South Africa. As she got up from her bed, she started thinking of how her road journey would play out that Tuesday. It would turn out that she had been making plans just some few weeks prior to visit her sick grandmother in Pietermaritzburg, the capital of KwaZulu-Natal, 69 miles away from her native home of Hlatshwayo. Even looking all hopeful on that Tuesday morning, Zanele still had some worries. She had earlier complained to her mother about her fears. These fears made her very nervous to embark on this road trip due to some WhatsApp messages that had been circulating just a few months earlier about women and children being abducted either from outside their schools or from their places of work, or any other random location. Hence, she had some days ago complained to her mother about her fears as the rate of kidnapping around the area kept on increasing at an alarming rate. The news had been making the rounds in the province, but she knew she really wanted to make this journey because, aside from taking care of her sick grandmother, she really wanted to see her other relatives whom she hadn't seen for a while. Zanele was a single mother with a 2-year-old son, so she knew she had people in her life she loved and who loved her also. She had to care for these people. Few minutes after these thoughts, she then spent some time to feed her 2-year-old son, whom she had decided to leave in the care of her cousin sister called Nozipo, and a few of her other relatives whom she lived together with. She began preparing for the journey, and some hours later, she looked herself in the mirror, and then she also made sure she had all she needed to make the 69 miles journey, which included some of the items she had brought along with her. As she shut the door behind her, she made it to the outskirts of the town, where she entered a local taxi. However, 20 miles away en route, she would signal to the driver that she was ready to step down at a location known as Escort. The driver stopped. She then exited the vehicle as she looked ahead while the taxi continued its way just behind her, and soon she was on her way to see this other relative. After seeing them, the second leg of her journey would begin. Meanwhile, back in her home in Hlatshwayo, Zanele's relatives, after several hours, had expected Zanele to have arrived before that late Tuesday evening in her grandmother's home in Pietermaritzburg. And even though Zanele never called to let them know that she had made it safely to her grandmom's place, they must have felt she was maybe just too excited for the visit, or forgot to call, or maybe just too tired or stressed out from the journey. However, a day or two went by, and still, they haven't heard from Zanele. The family had also been calling her phone, but it never went through all that week. But they weren't so concerned, even though they had expected Zanele to have phoned to tell them she was there safely, but they didn't receive any call from her. 2 weeks went by, and still, none of Zanele's family, which included her mom, siblings and cousin, had heard any update from her, especially how the grandmother was doing or whether she was coping. At this point, they started getting just a little bit concerned, as they felt Zanele was never one to not always reach out, not even for a whole 3 weeks. But Zanele's mom and other relatives felt she would explain herself whenever she comes back home. You know, thinking maybe that taking care of her sick grandmother or other outside job might have been keeping her extremely busy. However, towards the ending of the 4th week, after no one had still heard from her, Zanele's cousin sister Nozipo, who had been with Zanele before she left for Pietermaritzburg, decided to phone an aunt to check if Zanele made it home safe. The aunt picked up, and when she answered, Nozipo was chilled to the spine when she was told over the phone that Zanele never arrived to her grandmother's place. On hearing this, the rest of the family decided to reach out to close friends or anyone she knew to know why her line wasn't connecting and why she never made it to her grandmom's. However, all of those whom had been asked admitted not to have heard from Zanele. Now, the family were now getting extremely worried, especially since it's been nearly a month since some of them last saw her. It was the 20th of August 2017 and Zanele has just gone silent. Now, with some disturbing news making the rounds just 2 days prior to the 20th of August, Zanele's cousin Nozipo, together with Zanele's mother and other relatives, immediately went to the nearest police station to lay their complaints to the now supposed missing Zanele. As they made their case known to some of the officers, one of them would ask the women to describe what Zanele had been wearing on the day she left home, to which Nozipo described how she had put on a black legging, a shirt and a bag in which she had stuffed some of her other clothes. The woman, after giving the officer this description, asked the woman to wait and then went inside the station to bring out some items and then returned back carrying what Nozipo immediately pointed out as the outfits Zanele had worn on the morning of that 25th of July 2017, so almost a month ago. Except that Zanele was nowhere to be seen, and the clothes she wore hasn't just been retrieved clean. It was now all soaked in blood, and the jacket retrieved had been all covered in grasses. As the families began to weep uncontrollably with fears that something really bad might have happened to Zanele, they were also told that a body had been found. However, this body was not shown to them, but would be sent for a post-mortem, where it would only be released to them if the identity could be confirmed and finalized through DNA tests to be that of the missing Zanele. But by this point, the family had already believed that it was Zanele's. It would also turn out that the Hlatshwayo's family weren't the only family who were missing a relative in Escort, KwaZulu-Natal. There have been nearly a dozen families, if not more, who have gone to police to check whether their missing loved ones were victims of a major scandal that had rocked the largely rural community just a few days prior. On 6 p.m. on the 18th of August 2017, so 2 days before Zanele's family came to make a report to the police, a man had walked into the local police station in Escort, carrying a pink school bag, where he stood in front of some of the police officers. Then, with a serious look, opened his mouth and began shouting something. As he was shouting, the constable and other police officers present began to think that this man was either mentally unstable or at least intoxicated, and continuously forced him to remain silent, but this man was insisted on speaking in his local Zulu language. The man also seemed to be speaking out of turn as he continued shouting and saying something which just sounded unbelievable. So the officers didn't take him seriously, as they just wanted him to leave or make his intentions known when he was ready to speak up. But when the man kept on insisting on what he was saying, the police officers knew that what he was saying was self-incriminatory, so they would read out his rights, but the man persisted with his story, telling the police officers that he was tired and they should hurry up to his home or those detaining him would escape. Still thinking that the man was mentally unstable, the police officer then returned back to what he was doing. But at that moment, the man opened his bag and slowly reached out and showed the officer what he had brought along with him, dropping it on the front desk. The officer, on saying this, his eyes widened with horror, and at that moment, some of the officers initially backed off, while some local people inside the station fled the scene. More officers who heard what had happened would slowly draw closer to take a clearer look at what this man had just brought out. At that moment, the officers all knew that what this man had been saying just some moments ago was turning out to be a horrific truth. They soon gathered around the man, and the constable proceeded to arrest the man on the spot. But after the initial shock from the police won out, the officers began to try to wrap their heads around what they had just heard and seen, so they began to question the man. As the man began to review what happened, he would describe a horror story which shocked the entire community in Escort. Guys, this is Dark Vic speaking, and if you're enjoying the stories from the channel and would like to see more videos like this, consider using this opportunity to join our channel by subscribing, liking the video, and turning on all post notifications as I regularly upload story videos. Doing so is free and helps our channel. By our, I mean both you, me, and all of us already subscribed. And with that said, let's get back into the story. It would turn out that the man who walked into the station carrying the pink bag was a 32-year-old called Nino Mbata. And what Mbata had told the police officers, which made them not to take him seriously, was that he, Mbata, needed police help as he was tired of being forced to consume human flesh. But since either the officers didn't believe what he was saying or was not taking him seriously at first, he proceeded to open the bag which he had with him, reached inside, and pulled out a decomposing human hand and leg and placed it on one of the officers' desk, which made him and some of his colleagues around to back off, with the local people who saw the human body parts taken to their heels. But as one of the male officers called his colleagues to come and witness what he was saying, which made some of them to take off, as they slowly drew closer, Mbata reached for the bag again and pulled a stinking handkerchief filled with tiny decomposing human pieces which were slightly dripping blood and placed it on the table. With the look of horror on the officers' faces, it was then that everyone knew they were not dealing with just someone they had thought was mentally unstable or a psycho, but a possible murderer. After further questionings, confessions and claims that he was being forced by some group of people to eat human flesh and for the officers to quickly come over to his place and detain these people so they don't escape, the officers immediately proceeded to place Mbata under arrest. Mbata would lead about 10 of the officers to a house he had been renting for some months. On arriving at Mbata's house, the officer would see that the windows had no burglar guards and the door was not locked or broken, which indicated that there was no way for this man to have been held captive, since he earlier claimed that he was being forced to consume flesh. On opening the door to his house, the police officers were met with this very foul, decaying, stomach-turning stench which filled the entire house. On opening the door to his room, right on the floor were various plastic bags, gallons, plates, electrical appliances, and other sorts of traditional fetishes. But Mbata walked over and proceeded to open a cooking pot where the constable and his fellow officers saw 8 human ears within the cooking pot. Close to the pot was a bucket which he pointed to the officers, to which the officers gestured him to open it, where they found more gruesome body remains of their victims, including human jaws and intestines, together with various other bloody organs, all mixed up. Also, among the body discovered was an armless, beheaded and severely mutilated body that had been buried under rocks in a veldt close to where Mbata lived. To make matters more horrendous to what was being seen by these officers, the missing body parts was told by Mbata to have been consumed between him and some of the many locals living within the area. It would also turn out that Mbata was a self-proclaimed Iyanga. In South Africa, Iyanga is also known as a traditional healer, or what some would refer to as witch doctors, in most parts of Southern Africa. Earlier at the station after his arrest, what Mbata had confessed to the police was how he and some fellow colleagues had been killing, assaying and dismembering women around the area for various ridiculous purposes, which I would reveal as the story continues to progress. However, after so many body parts had been discovered in Mbata's home, he would reveal 3 more men who were his accomplices, and over the following days, more men who were linked either directly or indirectly were tracked down, arrested and taken to custody, and all would be charged with murder, attempted murder, and conspiracy to commit murder. One of the men arrested turned out to be a local butcher, which raised concerns that some of the body parts that have been retrieved at some of their homes might have found their way into people's dining table, but it wasn't really sure if that ever happened. It was during this arrest that the news began to make the rounds within the locals in Escort, and within 2 days, it got to Zanele's family, and that was when the fears that something bad may have happened to Zanele got to Nozipho, with she, together with Zanele's mom and the rest of the family, opened a missing person case in the police station. It was at the station that Nozipho would confirm the blood-stained clothing to belong to Zanele, as she saw her putting on those clothing before she left for Pietermaritzburg to go see her grandmother. A 5th, 6th and 7th man would also be arrested few days later, as the men, who were almost all in their early 30s, would later all appear in court to face those charges before shuffling out of the dock, covering their faces from the media inside the courtroom. As tempers were running hot among the locals, and with a large number of people still reported missing in at least 3 villages surrounding Escort in KwaZulu-Natal, armed guards were brought in to increase security at the court appearances for the suspected cannibals, as investigators considered the possibility that there could have been more accomplices due to the numerous body parts that had been found in their possession. However, although 2 more men were later arrested, no more person or persons was pointed out as another suspect, either from the cannibals, police, or the locals. The subsequent exposure and confessions from these men would prompt a ward councillor to hold a public meeting with more than 700 villagers in the community, where a whopping 300 of them publicly confessed to have knowingly consumed human flesh that has been offered to them by Mbata, including digging up dead bodies that has been buried and selling their bones to traditional witch doctors such as Ninombata and his accomplice Sitembiso Sitole. Also, during the meeting, some families also spoke about their missing family members, while some had discovered several mutilated bodies of either those they know or don't within the community. It would also turn out that for the past 5 years or so, following a story that broke out in 2017, several people had gone missing without a trace, and it would be revealed that various graves had also been desecrated and the bodies exhumed for such dark practices among neighboring villages within the town of Escort. These were practices that seemed to go deeper and more widespread among the poor villagers than what was actually feared within the district. Hence, Mbata's room was more of a shrine to his clients who came from around different villages in the area for different reasons. According to some of the villagers, it was believed, as told by Mbata, that eating the raw organs such as the heart and giving back human bones in return after they had robbed the graves would make them either physically stronger or healthier, fearless and brave, protect them from any sort of harm, whether physical or spiritual, give them enhanced sexual performance, or bring quick wealth to help them from their impoverished state. This was the various purpose that had driven some of them to consume Zanele's flesh or other victims. How the villagers believe this is what most of us really don't understand, especially since these obviously fake traditional healers themselves were poor. And how did Zanele become a victim, if you ask? Well, on the 25th of July 2017, after Zanele had stopped to see some relatives before continuing her journey to see her sick grandmother, according to Mbata, he stated finding Zanele drunk on a particular location where he offered her a ride after saying she had some traveling bags with her. According to Mbata, Zanele agreed for him to take her to her final destination. However, his plan was never to drop Zanele at her destination. Rather, he had picked up one of the men accused, called Magubane. Back in 2017, Magubane had approached Mbata for traditional medicines to help him attain good fortunes, and Mbata had suggested they get a woman or a child for this purpose, as the ancestors insisted that blood be spilled and the body consumed as part of a multi-traditional medicine that would be prepared with other local ingredients. The men then drove to a secluded location where Mbata, Magubane, together with Sitole, whom had earlier agreed to assist him, subdued her before proceeding to assay her severally, then slit her throat and beheaded her before proceeding to dismember some parts of her body for consumption. They also disemboweled her, putting the internal organs in the buckets that had been found in Mbata's room by the officers, before proceeding to hastily hide her other remains under a nearby veldt. The aim of cutting up the flesh and the organs had been to consume it for strength, and the purpose of hiding the body under those rocks was because they believed that this would hasten the decomposition process and attract maggots. According to what Mbata had told his client Magubane, more maggots meant more money for them within a shorter time. On September of 2017, a total of 7 men had been originally arrested, but 3 of them would have their charges later withdrawn due to insufficient evidence, while 4 of them was to face trial. 3 months later, which was on December 2017, the accused men would appear in court for a bail hearing, but They all opted to abandon their bail application, possibly due to the fears of the angry locals. In South Africa, there is no direct law against cannibalism, as it's mostly seen as a mental health issue or a psychotic episode, or some sort of visual and auditory hallucinations where people hear voices or see things that aren't there and having bizarre thoughts that pushes them to eat a certain body part, believing it will grant them power or invisibility. But mutilating or desecrating a corpse and being in possession of human tissue or parts are still criminal offenses. However, the men were not charged with consuming human corpses or possessing and offering human parts for sale. Hence, months following the arrest, Mbata would be found to be mentally and emotionally unstable and would be admitted in a hospital in Pietermaritzburg, where he would undergo mental assessment. Also, weeks after the autopsy was finalized, the armless, beheaded and severely mutilated body that had been buried under rocks in a veldt would be confirmed to be that of Zanele Hlatshwayo. Even though the family expected it, the confirmation crushed any slightest hope they might have held on to. This completed the investigation and the case was postponed to the 9th of April 2018, when Mbata's mental assessment should be complete, while the other 3 men were to remain in custody. But while awaiting their trial, Sitembiso Sitole would take his own life in prison, leaving 3 of the men. In Escort, with the story dubbed as the cannibal case, there was fears among the people that there were potentially more victims in and out of the town of Escort that had been cannibalized on or used for any other ritual or fetish purposes. On December 2018, speaking at the sentencing at the Pietermaritzburg High Court, the prosecutor defending the victim's family would state that the poor helpless Zanele, who from the dirt and grasses found on her clothes, it was evident that she had struggled as she fought for her dear life. Now, it is worthy to note that true traditional healers do not spill human blood to help their clients. But Mbata, who was supposedly a fake healer, had been rumored to have problems in the past with some other local villagers during the course of his time as a self-proclaimed healer before escaping to Escort. He was found to be mentally stable to stand trial. However, while in court, all the men accused pleaded not guilty to the crimes. One of the men was acquitted, also due to insufficient evidence, while Mbata and Magubane were found guilty of murder. The judge would mention how Mbata and Magubane were guilty of the most heinous crime, saying, "What happened in this case is truly awful. It was the stuff of nightmares. How one would react in such circumstances is unpredictable. One may well want to unburden oneself of guilt, but later have second thoughts." Both men would be sentenced to life in prison, which is equivalent to spending 25 years in jail before they would be eligible for a parole. Till today, the story of how Zanele's corpse was consumed by the locals within and outside the rural community continues to disturb the family. According to the family, what Zanele passed through in the hands of her murderer must have been brutal, and during their victim impact statement, the sorrowful family talked of how the painful imagination of what their daughter, sister, and their mother went through gives them anxiety and fear, and that dreadful act of her being eaten still haunts them. Zanele was loved by all those who knew her and never deserved such a brutal, horrific, and a very much disrespectful ending. She continues to be remembered by all those who knew her, and she, together with other victims of this story, who may or may never have been identified till today, solely remain the focus in this story.